Hi folks, Dana here from Healthy Wealthy Habits. I would like to talk today about how your environment affects your health. So if you haven't been on my channel before, I'm Dana Green Remedios, a triple board certified registered holistic nutritionist, and I also have an honors degree in political science. So today I'm going to combine both of those topics to discuss the idea of social determinants of health. If you haven't come across this term before, social and political determinants of health are things like how the distribution of power or the distribution of resources at a high level affects you at a personal level with your health. So, for example, if you live in a rural northern community, you may find that your groceries are very expensive, especially for fresh food, or you might not have very good quality water. And those things can affect your health quite directly. There's also a lot of more indirect factors that can affect our health as well, such as the habits of the people around us, the education level of the people around us, and things like that. So I would like to know what you think might be affecting your health at the political level, at the social level, and I would love to hear about that in the comments. Essentially, how does your environment affect your health? Is your community a place where you feel safe? Do you feel supported there? Do you feel like you can celebrate your culture? Do you have access to culturally appropriate foods in your neighborhood? In the area where I live, there are many types of specialty grocery stores catering to people from all different kinds of backgrounds. There's a Persian grocery store, there's a Filipino grocery store, there's a Caribbean grocery store, there are African stores, there's an Indian store. There are lots of different stores catering to different people. For example, a butcher that caters very much to the northern Indian crowd, and they don't carry pork. So there's just a lot of different types of ways that we can feel supported or not so supported in our community. For example, the outcome of a pregnancy can be determined to some extent by how good the community support is for the mother as she's going through her pregnancy. Community support can make a huge difference. So I'd like to tell a little story about when I was growing up, and this is about entitlement. And so the word entitlement has definitely come to be hand in hand with something bad. Certainly, if we use it to indicate something like a feeling of you owe me, if I'm entitled, then that means I think you owe me, then that can be a very narcissistic trait, not a very helpful, not a very pro-social trait. Essentially, when we come into the world thinking about how we can contribute to others, and when we come into the world thinking that we are all equal, often this is a lot more conducive to having good relations with other people and having a happy, healthy community. So this feeling of being owed, there are definitely some well-deserved negative connotations with that. However, oftentimes we need some degree, some level of entitlement as a way of building our own sense of self-worth. So I think sometimes the way that you're raised makes you get used to something versus something else. For example, how many resources do you consume? So if you grew up wealthy, you're probably accustomed to consuming plenty of resources. In the book Power, Money, Fame, Sex, Gretchen Rubin actually talks about this in a very tongue-in-cheek manner. It's kind of satirical, so don't take it literally if you read the book. But she talks about how people who have power and money, people who are famous, and people who get as much sex as they would like, are often entitled, or they consume a lot of resources. They believe that they should consume resources. And she even suggests in the book that if you would like to be portrayed as someone that someone should give power or respect to, if you would like to ask for a higher salary, then you should always consume resources. So what this looks like, her example is, if you arrive to some kind of meeting and there are cookies and coffee being offered, you always take some. You take it, always take it, whether you want it or not. Essentially, even if you take it and waste it and you don't even drink it. Being seen consuming resources and assuming that you should and have a right to those resources positions you as someone who feels important. And so if you have too much of this, that can be very narcissistic and not helpful to our society, and in fact is probably leading to these, hauls that people do where they overbuy stuff. And a lot of the time, this is just very destructive for the environment. We're consuming way more than we need. I definitely think that we shouldn't be all trying to up the ante on consuming resources. However, there's a fine line there where if you don't feel entitled enough and you don't consume enough resources, or you hold yourself back from consuming resources, this can actually affect your health. So, of course, overconsumption of resources might be seen as like binge eating or connected to binge eating, and not feeling like you should take up space, not feeling like you should consume resources might be connected to things like anorexia or bulimia. And of course, anorexia is like the most dangerous and most serious of the mental health conditions, the one most likely to result in death. So it is no joke. So people that tend to have anorexia or bulimia tend to believe that they shouldn't take up space. They tend to believe that they should be more altruistic. They oftentimes don't want to be seen as consuming that many resources. It can be linked to some extent to bad self-esteem or bad self-worth. Those things are not synonymous, self-esteem and self-worth. But self-esteem is your belief in yourself to some extent, and self-worth is in your belief about your value. And you need to have some degree of self-worth, therefore some degree of entitlement, believing that you deserve some things. Not that everybody owes you, but that you're as good as everyone else, for example. Because if you don't believe that, you'll never be able to advocate for a good salary for yourself. You'll never be able to get the things that you need to take care of your health. Taking care of your health isn't completely free. You can, of course, get most of the most key important things for free, such as walking in nature, and for most people, drinking water, getting exercise. But it can be very difficult if the social determinants of health are affecting you. You may live in a place where clean water is something you have to pay for. You may live in an environment where if you want to exercise in clean air, you need to exercise inside in a place with an air filtration system. Like right now where I live in Canada, there are so many fires burning that not every community is safe for outdoor exercise, free exercise. And not everyone has a place to exercise in their home. So this is one way that the political and social determinants can affect your health. And this is how entitlement can be connected to some extent with how well we are able to take care of ourselves. We need to be able to advocate for ourselves, and we also need to think about what is our frame of reference. So connecting money and the mind-body-money connection to this topic of how does your environment affect you, I'd like to tell a personal story about when I was younger and I went to camp. So I went away to camp, and of course, while I was away, we would shower and wash up in a big shared kind of shower environment. It was a big shower house, and we all had to bring our own shampoo and things like that from home. And I remember that there was a girl that was using an expensive, in my mind, a higher end shampoo than what I was used to in the shower, and she left the bottle behind in the shower. And when I picked it up, it wasn't very heavy, but it had some left in it for sure. And so I ran out after her as she left, and I said, "Hey, you forgot your shampoo." And I thought she would be so grateful, because I thought, this is expensive shampoo, it's fancy to me, and she's left it behind. And she looked at me like, that's empty, and you can just throw it away. And I definitely could feel that there was shampoo left in it. And this was a wake-up call for me, because it made me realize that to her, this amount of shampoo is not worth the effort of trying to get out. Because we all know that the bottom of the bottle, you maybe have to turn it upside down, you have to work to get it out. And for her, it wasn't worth it. And I had been raised to never waste. And if I had had a fancier, like salon quality shampoo at that point, I would not have been throwing away, the last couple of uses of it. And what was also very surprising is that not only did she mean to not finish the bottle, she meant to just leave it behind in the shower for someone else to deal with, which for me was shocking. Like, how could you not? This is before recycling was really a thing, so it would have just gone into the garbage. But it still should have gone into the garbage. It shouldn't have been left behind in the shower. That's the kind of level of entitlement I'm talking about, where you assume that other people or, things will just happen to support you. Now, nobody should go through life like that, which is clueless, but also my perspective at the time needed an upgrade. I don't believe in waste still, and I do want to do things that are better for the environment. I don't like the idea of wasting something that comes in a plastic bottle and then throwing the plastic bottle away. But the point is that I should feel comfortable consuming resources, and I should also have a value on my time that is closer to what she had. Because if I don't value my time, I could spend all day trying to get the last little drip out of a bottle. How much is my time worth? At what point do you call something and say, oh, this is no longer valuable to me? And this type of thing is very likely to affect your health outcomes, because you need to be willing to put time into your own self-care, and you need to value yourself, your mental health, your physical health, your time that you spend preparing food or having food prepared for you, for example. How much is your time worth? And how much is your mental and your physical health worth? Just some food for thought, just some things to reflect on. And finally, a last topic that I'd like to talk about is intersectionality. So when we talk about the social determinants of health, we're talking about how things like, where you live and how much you earn and what level of education you have, your age, your race, things like this, how they can affect your health outcomes. These are things that oftentimes you might be born into, and they're not directly related to how you're eating, to whether you're smoking or not. You may be in an environment that's smoky without being a smoker. For example, if you work a dirty job, you may be exposed to fumes because of that job. So, for example, a very unhealthy environment might be in construction. There's often a lot of different things that are being used there. Like if you're doing roofing, there's a lot of stuff that you're breathing in, like tar, that kind of thing. Or if you work in a beauty salon, then obviously we know the gel nails, very dangerous for health, the fumes, and also a lot of the things that we use on our hair, like keratin treatments, are toxic and have formaldehyde as well. So people that breathe this stuff in every day, all day, it can definitely affect you. So these are some environmental factors that it can affect your health. But on the larger scale, there are a lot of Indigenous communities in Canada where when we have toxic waste, it gets buried out by their communities or even in their communities or upriver of their communities. Oftentimes upriver of Indigenous communities, there are fracking or oil rigging types of drilling operations, and these things can affect health downstream very obviously. Some of the other things that might affect you might be if your community is unsafe and there's actually a good chance of violence, and then this can definitely affect you. Gun violence or even just assaults in general, and not just your chance of getting hurt, but the way that stress of feeling like you might be at risk, how that might affect your stress chemicals, your levels of cortisol, your levels of adrenaline and noradrenaline and things like that, and how that affects your health and your nervous system, especially over time. So the idea of intersectionality is one that I want to bring into this conversation. If we imagine an intersection, you're much more likely to get injured when you're going through an intersection. You're probably familiar with this concept. It's safer to be driving this way along a road than it is to intersect with another road where it's more likely that you could have an impact. So if you are someone who is dealing with the social impact of being a person of color, and then you are also someone who is dealing with the social impact of being someone who is gender non-conforming, you are in an intersection that is much more likely to be harmful and cause you an impact than if you were only dealing with one or the other of these social issues. And so both of these can cause a higher risk for health issues. So women who have experienced racism in the workplace definitely report higher levels of health issues. So we know that these things are definitely related and connected. And so the more intersections you may be a part of, the more likely that you are to be affected. It's, for example, being Black and female is much riskier, or being Indigenous and female is much more dangerous than being only a person of color or being only female. And so we need to look through this type of intersectional lens, which can be one of ability, it can be one of neurocognition, so whether you are neurodivergent or if you're more neurotypical, wherever you are on that spectrum, and where that might intersect with gender, with your income level, with other identities that you have, religious or otherwise. The main thing is, are you of the dominant of that factor, or are you of the non-dominant group? So when we're talking about females and males are dominant. And when we're talking about neurotypical or neurodivergent, neurotypical is dominant. And when you're talking about wealthy or impoverished, wealthy is dominant, and so on. And so the more intersections someone experiences in their life, the more likely that is to have a negative health outcome or a negative outcome in general for them, whether that be mental health or something else. So this is something I'd like you to be aware of, whether it is something that affects you or not. So I, for example, am in a heterosexual relationship, and I am gender conforming, and I am not of a particular religion, and I do not feel that in those areas that I am finding myself to be at higher risk. However, I am still, even though I am probably white presenting, I am a very mixed race person whose family has had a lot of issues with racism. And so I have that as part of my intergenerational legacy. And I'm also neurodivergent, and I've also got a lot of other places where I may find that in terms of my intersectionality, I have a few areas of concern. So I also am someone who am comfortable with technology, and there's definitely a technology divide. There's a rural and urban divide. I live in the city, so I have that advantage, and I am capable of technology, so I have that advantage. People that live in rural environments or are not technically literate often have really big struggles. So think about these types of intersections. How does this help you to understand other people's struggles better? It's not just being, lesbian or being trans that might affect somebody. It's how that is coupled with how they present in terms of other aspects of their identity. And so let's try and take this into consideration so that we can make a better society for everyone else, and so that we can have compassion, self-compassion for ourselves. I hope that you got something out of this discussion, and I hope that you'll contribute to it down below in the comments. Thanks for joining me. This is Dana Green Remedios, and feel free to also use the Ask Dana link if you'd like to ask me a question to answer in the future. Bye for now.